Holiness, or Kedusha in Hebrew, is a difficult concept for our modern minds to truly grasp. When I think of holiness, I imagine something like a glowing white light, often around an important object or person of some kind. It has an otherworldly quality, not unlike the depiction of, let's say, the Ark of the Covenant in the Indiana Jones movie. This conception of holiness is a prime example of how the English language carries with it a trail of outside influence, meaning it doesn't quite capture the Hebrew original, Kedusha. This week's Torah portion, Kedoshim, is a guide to holiness. Rather than just a bare list of rules and regulations, sprinkled throughout this portion are reminders of the Torah narrative as a whole, as well as declarations of what it means to be in covenant with God. God says, "You shall be holy to me, for I, Adonai, am holy, and I have set you apart from other peoples to be mine." This statement is loaded with questions. What does it mean to be set apart from other peoples? And what does it mean to belong to God? This designator of our people as both set apart and belonging to God evokes an image of a group cordoned off from the world, separated, maybe by that same kind of glowing white light that we see in the movies. But that certainly doesn't reflect my experience as a Jew or of other Jews. A midrash helps elucidate another approach. When God appeared in order to give the Torah to Israel, it is not to Israel alone that God appeared, but to all of the nations. First, the children of Esau, and God asked them, "Will you accept the Torah?" They asked, "What is written in it?" God answered, "You shall not kill." They answered, "The entire essence of our Father is murder." God then went to the children of Ammon and Moab and asked them, "Will you accept the Torah?" They asked, "What is written in it?" God answers, "You shall not commit adultery." They answered, "Sovereign of the universe, illicit relations are our entire essence." There was none among all of the nations to whom God did not go and speak and knock at their door, asking if they would accept Torah. If this is the case, then our ancestors chose this covenant for themselves. Not only that, they were the last people it was offered to. From this perspective, rather than God having chosen us to be set apart as holy, we chose holiness. This provides us a brand new context for understanding what Kedusha means based on our relationship to God and the land of Israel. Much of the Torah is predicated upon this relationship. The revelation at Sinai was geared towards providing the fledgling people of Israel a guide for their new habitation. The covenant itself and the people's dwelling in the land was predicated upon their following this guide and remaining kadosh, holy. In our portion this week, God tells the people, "You shall faithfully observe all my laws and all my regulations, lest the land to which I bring you to settle in spew you out. You shall not follow the practices of the nation that I am driving out before you, for it is because they did all these things that I abhorred them." From our historical vantage point, we now know that the Israelites were indeed expelled from the land. Whether this text was written before or after the expulsion by the Babylonians in 586 BCE, the implications remain true. If the Israelites chose to accept the Torah and were given the land as part of that deal, they equally chose not to follow the aspects of the Torah that led to their being forced from the land. Underneath it all, there is the element of choice in regards to the Israelite relationship to the Torah and to holiness, Kedusha itself. The link connecting all of these texts together is our relationship to other peoples. Our portion's definition of the Israelites, if we include the Midrash, is a group of people in ancient times willing to hold themselves to a standard of ethics that other ancient peoples were not. This, in turn, made us God's belonging and also was the basis for our having been granted the land. All of these aspects of this Torah portion coalesce together into a definition of holiness or Kedusha quite different from that of the bright glow. In fact, the renowned scholar Mary Douglas has done the legwork for us to help us understand what it means in this context. In her book, Purity and Danger, she wrote, "We can conclude that holiness is exemplified by completeness. Holiness requires that individuals shall conform to the class to which they belong, and holiness requires that different classes of things shall not be confused." Another set of precepts refines on this last point. Holiness means keeping distinct the categories of creation. It therefore involves correct definition, discrimination, and order. Holiness, Kedusha, is then attempted by striving to realize our individual and collective completeness. With a quick survey of the categories of mitzvot put forth in our portion as the path to Kedusha, we find they are primarily about treating others with compassion, not abusing power, and centering life around the oneness of the divine. That is our completeness. These delineations give us a ground for our behaviors and our practices. That is only the starting point. Holiness, Kedusha, is clearly something above and beyond, something more active, something participatory. So, as we now reside outside of the land, having been spewed out long, long ago, what does it mean for us to be kadosh today? How do we find completeness in our place and time? Jewish separation, inhabiting our own individual and collective completeness, is often phrased and framed in a very physical way. Much has been made about endogamy, about our mitzvot as having been designed in order to prevent us from bonding with non-Jews. But let us, for a moment, look at the land of Israel as a training ground for Kedusha. Our exile from the land allowed us to spread throughout the rest of the world, now having encountered and cultivated Kedusha as a people, now having experienced that separation. This movement from centralized in a singular land to scattered across the planet changed what it meant for us to be kadosh. No longer did we need to abhor the acts of our neighbors. We now lived in completely different relationship to them. We were able to learn from them by applying to their ways the ethical grounding that gave us our Kedusha, which we learned so early on in our relationship with God and Torah in the land of Israel. By applying this to the new revelations around us, we came to derive new tools for connecting to divine oneness. As the great Rabbi Abraham Geiger wrote, "Whenever fresh spiritual life awoke, whenever vernal breezes, though even only apparently, passed through the world, when new civilization made its appearance and streams of the Spirit traversed the land with their fertilizing waters, there the Jewish people also knew to draw new life. There the Jewish people also was intimately bound up with the spirit of the age." As our liturgy tells us, holy, holy, holy is Adonai Tzevaot. The whole world is full of God's glory. Holiness, Kedusha, is ultimately about us as a people and as individuals, having a firm grounding in the ethics and philosophies of our ancestors, and using that grounding to continue growing the tree of life in our own time and place, drawing from fertile ground wherever we find it. In doing so, we activate the piece of ourselves that is the divine image, that strives to be like God, holy in oneness. Shabbat Shalom.